So moving on to our next presentation, this is going to be a fun one, I promise you. I've seen these guys rehearsing. So we're going to have Bruce Sanderson from Apache joined with Mansour Raad from Esri to come out and talk about big data. Guys?
Hi, my name is Bruce Sanderson, and like many of you, I've been using the same old recipes to cook up a traditional GIS. And when you're cooking a traditional GIS, well, you always start with geospatial data. That's the fundamental part. Without that, you don't have a recipe. And we as GIS professionals, we spend a lot of our time looking for GIS data so that we can create the dish. And quite often, we don't have enough. But once you have the GIS data, then you can mix in mapping and visualization. And then to that, you can add geoprocessing analysis, cook everything for 45 minutes at 350 degrees, then you have your traditional GIS, right? If it could be that simple. Well, our users love what we're serving. They ate it up. But recently, things at Apache are getting a little sticky with the recipe. And if you take the analogy of ice cream and data, well, we suddenly have more data than we can store, process, or visualize. We've got a big data problem. Now, some people may think this is not a problem at all, but for us it is. And really, this term, big data, has been used so much, it's losing its meaning. So really, for us, it's big spatial data. And this is what's happening to us at Apache, and it's probably happening to you as well. You may not realize it. So let me give you a couple of revelations. One, the traditional recipe for the traditional platform is no longer going to work in a big spatial data world, okay? And the next revelation is that you're going to have to change the recipe so that you can actually get what we call big understanding out of the data. So if you don't take advantage of the big data, then you don't get the big understanding. So what did Apache do to address this challenge? Well, back in 2013, late 2013, we began tracking all of our fleet vehicles using GPS and the GeoEvent processor. Now, that worked great when we're trying to do dynamic real-time mapping and visualization, but we also wanted to store the historical points so that we can go back and do analysis. Now, this is where things got complicated. And what happened was that the data started stacking up. It started outstripping our ability to store it in the traditional platform. And the recipe didn't tell us what to do. So we were stuck, and we didn't know what to do. We couldn't store it in the spatial database. So what we ended up doing is taking chunks of the data and just storing it out as flat files, and hopefully we could use it sometime in the future. And we kind of forgot about it. Well, a year goes by, and an internal group approaches us and asks, hey, can we go back and do some historical analysis with this data? Well, the answer was no. We didn't have the right recipe. We couldn't go back and look at that data. So we were challenged to find a new platform where we could take that big data and do something with it. And you may have heard of Hadoop, which is a big data platform. So we started looking at Hadoop. But the problem was, how do you take Hadoop for big data and actually join that with the geospatial environment? We had no clue. We didn't know what to do. So really, we needed a new recipe. We needed a new cookbook. And most importantly, we needed a new cook. And that's where we were fortunate enough to meet Mansour Raad. He is Esri's big data chef, okay? So we had the fortune of bumping into Mansour at the Esri Dev Summit one year. And he helped us get started with big spatial data and new recipes. So we had a big data workshop, which was supported by Mansour and also Hiram Ernstrom from IT Nexus. And this got us going with the new recipes that we needed to get that new big understanding that we were looking for. So Mansour, can you tell us how we got started?
Yeah, so as Bruce said, we met at the Dev Summit a couple of years ago, and we ended up talking about for 45 minutes on how we can help each other. And so I recommended, because the data was a little bit sensitive, that we have an on-site 4-day training class. And in the first 2 days, I basically did a Vulcan mind meld with them on what Hadoop is, And I told them, got them familiarized with how to store petabyte of data, in HDFS, which is the Hadoop file system, how to query those millions and millions of records using SQL, using Hive, and then we told them about how to move their data from their relational database to HDFS using Scoop. And the biggest thing that I wanted to do was to get them into a big spatial data mindset, not to be afraid of the data, and to start thinking in different ways, like parallel, distributed, and bring programs to data. That is something that is different. And once they understood that, on day 3 and day 4, all the recipes that we learned on day 1 and 2, we took their pain points that they've been having, like the problem that Bruce was saying, and we implemented them in big data, and more importantly, within the ArcGIS platform. So everything was driven from the ArcGIS platform to talk to these big things. And he's not afraid anymore of his data. Instead of working on those months at the time, like 1 month at the time, 2 months at a time, now he can look at his whole data holistically, and that was a big deal for us. And one of the recipes that we brought in at the time that we had was this thing called GIS tools for Hadoop. It comes in with the set of ways of working with polygons, lines, and points on massive scales. We have spatial indexing, and it's a great set of tools that comes into that. So what we end up having at Apache is a local Hadoop cluster. So we work with their IT guys to set up a local system, a local Hadoop cluster. We stored all this data that he's been archiving. You remember he took all these data, these CSV files, all these archived data. We moved them all to HDFS, so now we can access them all holistically. We use Spark to come up with new geoprocessing, such as binning, hotspot, similarity analysis. All these things were hard to do. Now suddenly, we can invoke them all through the ArcGIS platform. And what was the glue between the two things was ArcPy. I think one of the smartest things that Esri did was invest in Python and with the ArcPy language, because that enabled us to glue big data and GIS data, and of course, all that is invoked from the ArcGIS platform. So you can see it now in action. Through a geoprocessing extension, which is an extension platform in action, now he can invoke all these big tools and do his big work. So suddenly, the lights came on.
And the light bulbs came on in a really big way. Suddenly, we had new recipes that we could use, and we were no longer afraid of big data. In fact, we became hungry for data. We started looking for big data sets so that we could start analyzing those. And another phenomenon was that we became question-driven instead of data-constrained. So we were no longer tied up with the data. We were free with these new recipes to actually start exploring the data and answering the questions to get that big understanding that we were looking for. And here's an example from the workshop. So the red dots represent our active wells. The purple spots represent the driver tracks. And I'm going to zoom in on this so that you have a clearer picture. But you can see here's one observation, is that we've got some wells that apparently aren't being serviced. There's no tracks around those wells. So we couldn't have seen this before without the ability to bring all that data in together at one time. Another observation, we've got tracks close to a well, but not really next to it. Maybe these wells are in the wrong location. And then finally, here's a lot of tracks, but there's no well anywhere near that. So we're probably missing something right here. So for the first time, we could take in all that data and do this sort of visualization. So it's pretty cool. And some stats, and this will blow you away. We were able to calculate for 700 plus vehicles for the year, the off-road mileage, and that process took us 6 minutes. Right. Amazing. We were able to load a specific vendor production data set. And this used to take us 3 days to load into our spatial database, and sometimes it failed before it completed. We were able to now do that in 14 seconds.
And querying it, don't forget.
And query it, that's right, and analyze
Very
it too.
important.
And then another vendor data set of directional surveys, we were able to analyze that entire vendor data set in 10 seconds. So these are phenomenal improvements in our ability to process.
And that last one, remember, Bruce, when we did that, we actually did not believe the answers when we ran it so fast. We had to go back and double check to make sure.
We ran it several times because we didn't believe it ran, right?
So quickly, exactly.
Like it was too fast.
That was pretty cool.
So amazing improvements in time. So in summary, again, in the world we live in today, with all the data coming in, the traditional recipe is not going to work, not by itself. So you need to do something different if you want to get big understanding of your data for your organization. Today at Apache, we now have all the ingredients, thanks to Mansour, to really create our own custom recipes so that we can go out and now store, process, and visualize those big data sets that we couldn't process before. And then finally, and this is the good news, in the future, there's going to be more recipes coming from Esri, and they're going to be embedded in the platform. So you won't have to go through all the pain that we did to create these custom recipes and cookbooks. Closing slide. Process in parallel always makes things go smoother, right? And we're hoping that by the International Esri User Conference, this book will be out.
No, this is wishful thinking.
So
I mean,
we've got to capture your knowledge somehow.
So. I'll capture it, but not through a book. This is wishful thinking, but maybe one of these days I'll write something like that.
All right, very
right.
good.
Thank you, guys. Mansour, you got a side job authoring?
I don't know. We'll work on it together sometime.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, guys. All right, you never expected to see a big data presentation and see pictures of puppies and ice cream and all that good stuff. Big data is a pretty significant challenge to deal with. So it's something that on our team, we hear a lot from you, so it's good to hear and see that not only Apache is using big data solutions with ArcGIS, but has something in place that's delivering significant cost savings and bringing business value to the company. So very interesting aspect of work there.